Incidentally, one of our favorites who used to attend most of our baseball banquets passed away recently. We had him as a guest speaker for a number of years. We couldn't shut him up because he kept rambling on and on. But he was a great guy. I don't know Al Running if he was a great umpire, but Johnny Nenesich passed away this past winter, and we want to acknowledge that. He certainly was a legend in both the Coast League and the WI. Also want to give thanks to Jim Price for the great article in that program that you have at your table. He wrote the history of the WI League, and he's an old sportcaster from Spokane, and I think he was in Salem for a while, and also in Yakima. So he did a great job, and we're very appreciative of his work, and you'll find it all in the program. So Jim Price, our gratitude to you. If you'd like, you could applaud him, because I think he did an excellent job. Jim, why don't you acknowledge, just to wave your hand so we know you're for real. Jim, thank you. Now we're going to get into the inductees for the Hall of Fame, first with baseball. Incidentally, before we do that, we'd like to give special thanks to the Tacoma Rainiers for their contribution, along with the Tacoma Athletic Commission, for co-sponsoring the Oldtimers Banquet each year. And the Sue and George Foster of the Rainiers have always been great backers of this banquet. And now Holly G will make the presentations to our baseball inductees. First of all, we'd like to call on Mark Edwards. Well, first of all, let's call everyone up. Let's call Ozzie Edwards, George Grant, Gary Hersey, Harry Mansfield, Cliff Shees, and Otto Smith. His wife will accept for Otto. All come forward so we can make the presentations to you. Holly will present the awards. There's a bio, little summary of each of these inductees in the program. Holly G will mention some of the highlights of their careers. So first of all, Mark Edwards, come forward. Holly G will make the presentation on behalf of your dad.
Ozzie pitched briefly for the Tacoma Tigers, but we better know him as the knuckleballer of the city. He was one tough guy, and his pitch was really tough to hit. I had the fortune of playing with Ozzie. Not only was he a fine ball player, but a true gentleman. It's a pleasure to present this plaque to his son.
Our next, he has a large delegation here today, George Grant.
George is a fine young man that grew up in the Tacoma area. He was very, very outstanding in the City League. Mark Scott once said that he was the best shortstop in this area. George is a real competitor, fine gentleman, and an excellent ball player. It's a great pleasure to present this to you, George.
Kids said that I could have to keep this brief. Being an ex-high school principal, I'm used to making long orations here at the end, but I'd like to just thank everybody for this honor. It's one of those things that comes along once in a lifetime, and I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank my family, especially my wife, for putting up with me for all those years and all the games we played. Thank you.
Also acknowledge George's family. They will stand up and be recognized. Fine family, George, and congratulations. Next will be Gary Hersey.
Gary, along with his brother, grew up on a playground out at Jefferson. During their very early years, I had a great influence on their life, but the fact that they became great ball players was not attributed to me. Later, I had the fortune to play with Gary at UPS, or CPS at that time. That is true. Don't give him our age that way, Gary. But he was an excellent ball player, great competitor, outstanding athlete at Stadium High School, and then at CPS. It's with pleasure that I present this plaque to you, Gary.
All right.
Well, like George, I'm not used to speaking long-winded speeches, but I'm really sorry that Marv Scott isn't here tonight. Having played for Marv and having played with him, and as you know, he was a scout for the professional baseball team, and as I graduated from CPS, Marv said, I've got a spot for you down in Visalia if you'd like to turn pro. But let me tell you, your father's in the laundry business, and if I were you, I'd stick with the laundry business.
You know how old some of these guys are when he mentioned CPS. That goes back to about 48, doesn't it, Gary? 51? Well, anyway, a long time ago. Harry Mansfield, not here today, but Holly, you can mention a few words about him.
Harry was another player that played at UPS. Harry was another one of those gentlemen that came out of Stadium High School, a good all-around athlete, played football, basketball, and baseball. Later went on and played some semi-pro over in Butte, Montana. Harry was a very fine ball player, and he is very deserving of this award.
Okay, next, Cliff Sheaves.
Cliff came out of Bellarmine High School, where probably at that time they had all of 300 students. But boy, were they tough athletically. And there are a few names like Vern Morris, Cliff Sheaves, and the Martino brothers that always come to mind when we think of Bellarmine. Cliff was just really one terrific ball player and a great left-handed hitter. Cliff, it's a pleasure for me to present this plaque to you. He declines the offer to get even and speak.
Now, Herb Godfrey will accept for the late Otto Smith.
Otto was an outstanding ball player here in the old City League in Tacoma and the old Lincoln Bowl. Used to go in as a kid and watch this guy play. He was a true gentleman. He went on later and coached up in the Everett area, did so much for young men, for ball players, and was very instrumental in establishing a good baseball program in the Lake Washington area. Herb Godfrey will accept his award and speak on his behalf.
Thank you. Well, I'm really an old-time buddy of Otto Smith. I got married in '49 and out of a job, so I got a job at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. And Otto Smith was there, Bill McLaughlin, and then Herb Godfrey. So those characters weren't as crazy as I am, but Otto is really an outstanding baseball man. You read most of the things from your program, but he's also a good basketball player and baseball player. So I won't go way back into the 40s, but some of the things that he did after he left in Kirkland, with the help of Lee Johnson Chevrolet and Otto Smith organizing it, we started I was teaching there, helping coach. Joe McLaughlin was the coach. Hunter Mock, if any of you know him. So we had quite a crew. So Otto instigated Little League Baseball. So we had half a dozen teams, everything was donated, and the uniforms and everything else. And some years later, Kirkland won a Little League Championship of the World. Now it all goes to the Asian countries, I think. But Otto did a lot of things. He, especially, you ever heard of John Olyroot? I guess that was his name. Baltimore Orioles. Otto had a business there with them and organized the town team, sponsored by Baltimore Orioles. So got some good ball players. You know, they won. The 63 team won the Washington State title in the National Congress tournament in Wichita, Kansas. They won 5th in the nation. That was a team from Marysville. He used to talk about pitching. His wife says he used to talk about pitching for superior dairy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Eric. Once Mike Sage will take a picture of these inductees, and while he's doing that, I'd like to call Darren Nelson, Ken Jones, and Bill Woodard up to the stage for their presentations. Incidentally, Herb mentioned the old Superior Dairy. Maybe you remember when they played in Lincoln Bowl, and they had Aki Hoglund, the manager, and Joey Peterson, among others. That was back in the early 30s. Okay, Bob Young now will make the presentations, also acknowledge a few little things about each one of the inductees. So the first one, fast pitch softball, Bob Young making the presentation to Darren Nelson.
Well, let's hang on a second till these pictures are taken here. I believe we're all done, okay? The first one of these three gentlemen, and I know all of them quite well, is Darren Nelson. Darren Nelson is being honored in fast pitch. He played first base and outfield for the fast pitch teams of Warren Fork, Pay Impact, Luke Realty, Banquet, Coors Beer, and B&I. And Darren never hit under 300 in fast pitch. He led the league in 1974 with a 360 average. So that's very good in fast pitch. In addition to that, Darren played basketball for the Tacoma Plywood team for many years. He coached for 3 or 4 years. And in 1974, when the Tacoma Plywood team won the national title, Darren was the coach that year, of course, and he received the News Tribune Amateur Coach of the Year award, which is quite an honor. Darren is a solid athlete, basketball, baseball. He also coaches, as I've indicated. He also is a sports official. He's a refereed football for many years. In fact, we had a few games together. Darren is just a solid, excellent athlete and in several sports. Darren, congratulations.
Thanks, Bob. This happens once in a while, not very often in a guy's life, and it's a big day for me and my family. And I would like to thank my family for sticking with me and helping me along with my athletic endeavors. And I have a brother that flew up here all the way from Florida, he and his wife, to be with me today, and I'd like to say thank you. Thank you very much.
I'd like, as long as you want to stand up and be recognized. Darren's family, stand up. Good enough. Congratulations. Weather a little better up here than in Florida? No. Okay, and the next inductee, Ken Jones.
Ken Jones is being honored for slow pitch. He was an outstanding slow pitch player. In addition to that, he was an excellent hardball pitcher. Kenny played semi-pro in the City League from 1956 to 64. And in my opinion, he could be honored up here in hardball as well as slow pitch. Outstanding ball player. In slow pitch, he was on an all-star team in 8 individual tournaments, 1 regional all-star in Richland in 1968. I remember that tournament. He also received 1 MVP award in a local tournament. Kenny also officiated basketball for about 26 years now. I had the pleasure to work with him a number of years ago. I refereed for about 16 years, so we had several games together. Kenny is, at the present time, he's secretary-treasurer and also president of the Washington Officials Association. He assigns the basketball games. So he's been a sports person all of his life, outstanding athlete in baseball as well as slow pitch. Congratulations, Kenny.
This is truly a great honor. I know there are many, many people that I played with and against that are equally deserving of this award. I just thank everybody that I have been associated with through all the years and the committee for this selection. Thank you.
Ken, we'll have you back next year and give you the hardball award. Now the final inductee under softball, Bill Winter.
Well, Bill Winter is another person I've known for a number of years. Bill is an outstanding slow pitch player. He currently plays in the 60 to 65 age group in slow pitch. Last year, the team Emerald City out of Seattle, or Secure Horizons, whatever they call you, but anyway, they won the national tournament down in Phoenix, Arizona. I happened to be there at the time and saw their last 3 or 4 games. And in my estimation, Bill carried that club with his bat in those last 4 games. In the championship game, the bases were loaded and the score was tied in about the 3rd or 4th inning. And Bill hit it off the fence to clear the bases. Key hit all the way through that tournament. And then he came in and relief pitched in the last couple of innings. So outstanding slow pitch player in the senior softball division, and just a great guy, Bill Winter. Congratulations.
Thought that winning the senior world champions is a real achievement. Then a few months later, Bob called and talked about being inducted to the softball baseball Hall of Fame. I thought, wow, me? That was great. And I'd like to thank my kids. All 4 of them for putting up with Cardinal over the countryside.
All of you stand up, a whole bunch of you.
Biggest fan and supporter of 30 years. Wife Nancy. She's always there in the stands, hooting and hollering and whistling. This is really a great honor and blessed in many ways. Thank you very much.
I can tell that the little ones there, the grandkids, I think they're just as thrilled as your other members of the family. Okay, Mike Sage is going to take the picture, then we'll move on to some old WI leaguers. We have quite a few here today. I think if you'll refer to your program, you'll see some of the great clubs in the era of WI League play in the late 30s and even in the late 40s. Some people that are here today are not only ex-Tacomans, but also are members of other ball clubs, Wenatchee, Spokane, and Bellingham. Before we have the WI leaguers introduce, we have Holly G to make a special presentation to a fellow that really has kept this whole organization together for many years. Each year we give the Dill Howell Award. Dill was a former sporting goods dealer. Actually, I think in the old days he was connected with Kimball Sporting Goods, and they kept the old City League when they used to pass the hat around to finance the baseballs and the umpires' salaries. In those days, the salary was probably 99 cents a game or something like that. But now to make the presentation for the Dill Howell Award to Mark Blau, here's Holly G.
The meaning of this award, Mark fulfills and then some. If it were not for Mark, this program would not continue, and he's doing the same job for Pierce County in the parks and many other areas. I think rather than going on and speaking for an hour or two, which it would take to tell you about some of his accomplishments, I'd rather read from the plaque, the wording, and the reason for the presentation. For your significant contributions and loyal dedication to sports in the Tacoma-Pierce County community, this plaque is presented to Mark H. Blau. Please step forward, Mark.
Well, I want to answer one question real quickly. As I was talking to a lot of people about this event, setting it up, one of the most frequently asked questions, because I didn't know a lot of the WIL players, they said, well, what year did you play? No, I did not play in the WIL. No, I did not play in the old semi-pro leagues in the City League here in Tacoma, but I love baseball, and that's a criteria for being here, and I appreciate this honor. First of all, I would like to congratulate all of this year's inductees, and I want to welcome all the WIL players for coming here. Certainly it's an honor to be recognized with all of you. Everybody here truly played baseball because you loved the game. You certainly didn't do it for the money. Certainly you've had an awful lot of interesting stories to tell, especially when it comes to travel conditions and things like that. You have a lot of wonderful stories to tell, and I think that that's what separates you from today's ball players, because I can't imagine a reunion of today's ball players being near as much fun as this one has been, and certainly you've been to an awful lot of others in the PCL and whatnot. And it's the stories, it's the friendship, it's the camaraderie that you've established over 40 and 50 years of playing, which makes a reunion like this fun. My involvement in the baseball old-timers, about 10 years ago, a neighbor of mine who pitched for Tacoma started bugging me about coming to baseball old-timers. And I got to be honest with you, the first thing I said was, I don't know anything about Tacoma's baseball past, only from when I was enjoying baseball in Tacoma and the PCL in the early 60s. Why would I want to go to a banquet, sit there with a bunch of old guys, and listen to a bunch of boring stories? Now that's as honest as I can get. And so I held off for 2 years, and he finally kept bugging me to go, and I finally gave up, and I went, I sat at a table, and I think probably the average age was, at that time, about 72, 73, and I had a blast. They just told the stories, and I just sat there and listened, and that got me interested in, and I was always interested in history and family genealogy and whatnot, and that's what got me really interested in, instead of going to Tacoma from 1960 on, I wanted to find out more about baseball going backwards. And so my passion, my goal was to do some research on baseball all the way back into as far back in the early 1900s as I could. And a couple of years after that, I found myself chairman of the Baseball Old-Timers group. And I guess that's really jumping into it. And in '89, we had a reunion of the Tacoma Tigers of the WIL from 37 to 51. Had a great time. Larry Powell was up, Herm Rich, Alden Wilkie, Harvey Story, Jack Colburn, and again, the same thing. We met at a hotel, and the guys sat down about 10 o'clock that night. The stories just rolled for a couple hours, and I just sat there and soaked it all in. My next interest was in teaming up with Clay on the creation of a sports museum here in Tacoma. It was about 5 years of work, fundraising. We fundraised a little under $500,000. We opened up the Tacoma Pierce County Sports Museum in October of '94. It's located at the Tacoma Dome. It's about 1,300 square feet. Baseball, of all the sports in Tacoma, has probably had the richest tradition, started back in about 1890. And that sport is probably the most prominently displayed down in the museum. And the other thing that I've enjoyed doing, and certainly see a lot of the fruits of my efforts, are the collecting of memorabilia. And most of the memorabilia up there is mine. Some of it belongs to Dave Eskenazi, who is also an avid WIL and PCL collector, who's here today. But it's just fun to bring these items out and save the history, because too often history gets thrown away. And all of those items up there tell a story. My son, who's 12, keeps asking me, "Dad, do I get all your stuff?" And my response to him is, when you know the stories behind those things, then we'll talk. There have been a lot of people instrumental in letting me have fun. And my involvement with baseball is just fun. My wife and 2 kids have given up an awful lot of time. They're not here today. I couldn't possibly have asked them to come, because I knew I was going to be running around talking to a bunch of ball players here. And they would have just been kind of out there. So I told them, stay home, enjoy the sun, go and play, and whatever. And but they do allow me to indulge. I need to mention 5 I consider really good friends who really helped me. They were probably the first 5 people that I spoke to about the WIL, and kind of helped me get a feel for what the WIL was all about. So I want to mention those people because they're all here. Marion Oppelt, Harvey Story, George Nicholas, Larry Powell, and Kate Charlton. And those 5 gentlemen, like I said, were the first 5 that I ever talked to, and shared some great stories and some wonderful memories, and I'm truly indebted to those 5 gentlemen. The other person is Clay here, Tacoma Tigers broadcaster from 46 to 51, and certainly a longtime fixture in baseball circles here in Tacoma, and it was a lot of fun working with Clay on the Sports Museum. But last but not least, however, I want to thank all of you here, because you've certainly opened up your homes and your hearts, and most definitely your scrapbooks, whenever I've had a chance to get together and talk to you. And so I want to just thank all of you for making this award possible. Thanks.
Okay, now we're going to honor all the old WI Wiggers. And Mark will be down front. We'd like each of you to make a short response. Did you hear a short response? But, okay, Mark's going to work up here. We'll have a mic. Holly, you'll handle the mic down there. These are guys that were in the league, not necessarily with Tacoma, but in the league from 1937 on.
I did want to mention there were a couple people who had planned to come. One in particular, Earl Cooper, led the league in 47 with a 389 average, and Earl just had a stroke a couple of weeks ago. I called to try and get a hold of him today, and I did find out that he is out of rehab, and I believe he's back at home. But he was real sorry that he couldn't make it. I also just received a letter from Frank Volpe's wife, and many of you remember Frank, and he just recently passed away in February, and I did want to mention that because I know that the number of you do remember Frank. There were just a couple of reminders. In the back corner is a guest book, and I would like to get all of the players and Bat Boys and anybody who was involved in the WIL broadcasters to please take a moment to sign that guest book before you leave. It's in the back corner. Also, back there are a couple of articles. Certainly an event like this magnitude generated some excellent publicity in the newspapers, and so I just wanted to point out a couple. There is this article. I'll embarrass Larry Powell. Larry's on the front cover with a picture of the 46 Tacoma Tigers team, but there's some extra copies of this back there. There are also some copies of this article which appeared in the News Tribune sports section yesterday. Nice little article. As far as I know, this is the first WIL reunion. Anybody know anything different? And we're really pleased at how many people took the time to hop on an airplane from California, drive up from California, drive up from Oregon, drive over from Eastern Washington. It's just been tremendous. And we weren't sure just how successful it would be, but I think we have 35, 40 people here involved in WIL, and as far as we're concerned, that's a tremendous success. And I don't know, it's an event like this, when I see this many people that come, that kind of gets my fires rejuvenated to maybe do this again, or on an annual basis. I do want to mention again, and thank Jim Price for the great article he did. When we put out the souvenir program, we wanted to make it an impressive program that you would take home and enjoy reading. Put a lot of statistical data in there. Figured that would create some controversy, some stories, some memories, a little bit of everything. But I put Jim on the spot and kind of begged by a lot of email communication to do an article, and he said, "You want the short version, a long version?" I opted for the long version. I'm glad we did. And so the next thing is to try and convince Jim to do a book. And so if you have an interest in seeing a book, bug Jim, and then if we're relentless enough, perhaps he'll give in. One of the things that we are doing is trying to get some interviews with many of you to get a couple stories on tape. So afterwards, when the evening is finished, if some of you can stick around, we do want to take some time. Jim will interview you, and we'll get some stories on videotape. Hopefully, I will not omit anybody, but again, I'll call your name, come on up, get a certificate, and we'd like you to take a moment to, you don't have to relate a story, but please feel free to do so, and we'll take a quick picture, and we'll try and go through things as quick as we can. First we'd like to bring up Rugger Arteza, who played in Bellingham in 1938. Rugger?
No, it's an honor being here after 59 years. And I played up in the Western National League, and things sure changed from a few places I've been to since. But I remember I was optioned up here by the Hollywood Ball Club in 1938, and it was one of my most enjoyable times I've had playing in Bellingham, which I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe was the first year in the WI League. And I roomed with Joe Nunzio and Al Ramondi, and we had a place in Bellingham, and it cost us $60 a month, and we came to $20 a piece a month to live there. We got $1.50 meal money. And today, some of these ball players get meal money more than we made as a salary per month in the WI League. But all in all, though, I mean, I see Al Leitner is here. He was a bus driver and first baseman. And Clint Cameron played with me down in Hollywood, and he was my favorite catcher down there. I always tried to get him to catch, but being a left-hand hitter, Dykes wouldn't put him in as a hitter against left-handers. Then again, like these guys today, when we played, when I was with Casey Stengel, with 2 strikes and no balls on a batter, brush him back. Don't hit him, brush him back. Today, they throw bats at you, fight you, you get suspended. So earrings and necklaces and flying gloves, batting gloves, you name it, they got it, but it's not baseball like it used to be. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Bill Beard, played for Lewiston in '39 and Spokane in '41, had an outstanding career. Bill?
This is kind of like old home week. I spent 2 different sessions at nearby Fort Lewis. I was playing with Seattle in '42, and before the season's over, I was playing for Fort Lewis. And after spending several months in the South Pacific, I came back to Fort Lewis and was separated here. But I went to Willamette University in Salem, and I'd like to meet and talk to some of those fellows from CPS. If you're around there between 34 and 38, I probably played against you. Thank you.
This next individual won a WAL batting crown in 1949 with Wenatchee. Outstanding individual, Clint Cameron.
I spent 7 years in the WI League, starting in '41, winding up in '54. And what I'm enjoying most is seeing guys like Bill Beard, Harvey Story, Al Leitner, Al Spader, the Tran brothers. It's just a great evening. Thank you very much.
If you saw the picture in your program of the Capellanos quintet, you'll know that this next individual is a very shy, reserved player. Had a wonderful career with Vancouver, Victoria, and Tacoma in the WIL. If you had a chance to check out his thick-handle bat over there, I'd like to bring up Kate Charlton.
I've been trying to think of a story to tell. There's very many of them popping in my mind. One of them was with Tacoma, although I wasn't here very long. We were on the bus, and we were traveling to Salem. And we had a fellow named Bob Shovey on the bus, who was a left-hand pitcher. The young fella had cancer of the colon when he was younger, and he had a colostomy. But it didn't stop him from pitching, and he had a great sense of humor. And when we were going down the road, somebody yelled out the back of the bus and said, "Well, we're not going to play tonight." And we said, "What the hell are you talking about?" And he said, "It's raining." Shovey was going to the bathroom out the front door.
See, we'll accept any kind of story. Thank you, Ken. This next individual played for Yakima in the WIL, Frank Constantino.
There's a good attempt. Look at that face.
Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, I have a little story here about one of my battery mates. I never chewed tobacco in my life, and this man made me chew tobacco to throw his spitball, and that's Mr. Hub Kittle.
This next gentleman played here in Tacoma in 1947, Wenatchee 48, Salem in 1950, pitcher Stan Gilson.
Everybody's got a story, so I guess I've got to come up with one too. The best one I can think of that makes me feel, brings back memories is back in '47 I played for Tacoma, and then in '48 we played for about a month, and I got sold or traded to Wenatchee. So Tacoma kept doing well without me. And at one point, Tacoma and Bremerton were about tied for the pennant. And I pitched a ball game against Bremerton, their rivals, and won the ball game and went home feeling pretty good. But I got a surprise. I got a telephone. I mean, not telephone, a telegram. Well, telegrams always kind of scare you. And I looked at this telegram. It said, "Nice going, Stan. Keep up the good work. George Nicholas of Tacoma."
This next individual is a native of Pierce County, longtime pitcher in the WIL, played for Tacoma, Wenatchee, Tri-Cities. When he was with Tacoma, he tossed a no-hitter. His glove and cleats are over there on display. I'd like to bring up Cy Greenlaw. So far, everybody that's come up and said, "Where's Cy?" and I pointed him out, he hasn't changed a bit. Everybody has recognized him.
I would much rather be facing batter than being up here facing a microphone, so thank you all.
This next individual played in the WIL with Vancouver, Wenatchee, Yakima, Lewiston, long career in the WIL, Buddy Jelma.
Well, this is my 50th year, but I don't see any celebration about it like to do Jackie Robinson. But we started together.
This next individual, as I mentioned earlier, has had a long time history here in Tacoma, especially instrumental in baseball as a sports writer, sports broadcaster, instrumental in bringing the Tacoma franchise back in the PCL back in 1960. Jordan's breadcaster, I believe they referred to him, 46 to 51, the WIL, Clay Huntington. No, sir. This next individual played for Victoria in 46, Spokane, Tacoma Tigers 50-51, and WIL, Saul Israel. Saul. Saul, you've never been at a loss for words. Tell a story.
I haven't anything to say. I say thank you very much. Pleasure being here with all the buddies that I played with. Thank you very much.
I couldn't even begin to start rattling off all the credentials that this next player had, but In the WIL, he was with Yakima, Bremerton, Yakima on the other end. And I was told to make sure that he told the story. You can tell another story if you want, but I was told to make sure that Hub Kittle told us the story about Bob Molitor fighting with John Nenezich. Anyway, come on up, Hub. You're scratching your head, trying to figure out which story to tell.
Well, that was the dandy, that one right there. Well, thank you very much, I really appreciate it. I want to tell you something, like Gary, he said I was the luckiest man on earth. Well, boy, I'm the luckiest man still alive here today, because see all you guys that I haven't seen in 40 years, and my memories that I have you. I was one of the few guys that played the game. I didn't have nothing. My dad died when I was 6. And all of a sudden I could out-throw the kids down the block. And I knew I had something hanging there. And so I wanted to become a ball player. Well, eventually I signed with the Angels. I'm born in Los Angeles. And all of a sudden I go back, pitch for Catalina, and then they sent me back to Ponca City. Making $90 a month, I'm driving the bus. And I think I'm pretty good, you know, but all of a sudden, I got sold to Yakima for $400. Well, I come up here, goes over that Satis Pass, me and Bucky Harris in a Model A Roadster, and I had my St. Bernard dog in the rubble seat. And I come down over that hill, and I says, like Brigham Young, this is the place, boy. Well, it was my first time in the Northwest, and I won 20 games. And then I came back, I won 9 in a row, and then I got sick, but old Hunky Shaw, I was in bed, and he says, how you feel, Huck? I'm dying, Hunky. He said, you better feel pretty good. He said, we just sold you to San Francisco, boy, get up out of bed. Well, anyway, we went to SEALs. The war was coming along then, and bouncing around. I wasn't doing too good, but O'Doyle says, oh, you're a reliever, you can't start. So he made me a long man. And make a long story short, I went to Jersey City, then Oklahoma City, then Ray Jacobs was managing Spokane, and old Brian Humphrey spot us in the one Sunday, and he says, hey, we can't pay you this week. Could you guys wait till the Sunday doubleheader? We said, yeah. So we waited, then there was Herschel Martin, Dynamite Dunn, and me, brought us in. He says, yeah, you guys, I'm sorry, but I can't pay you anymore. We're going to have to give you a release. Well, this is 1942, but Jacobs was managing Spokane. So I get on the horn and phone him up, and he says, oh yeah, I want you for a band. I'll give you a $600 bonus. So I got on the bus, went up to Spokane with Ray. Now he was my manager in 39 when I was with the Pippins. And we got along great. I won 15 games. They sent me back to Oakland, and then all of a sudden, Uncle Sam grabs me, and I get in the service. But it's lucky I didn't get killed. You know, when I played at the 6th Ferry Command of Long Beach, then I went to Lowry Field, I played. Then I went over to Saipan, we formed the Pacific Olympics, and I got them to manage all the black guys, you know? So I got a little feel of what it was all about. So when I came back, what happened? Stengel's managing all of it. So he sees me, and he don't like me too much anyway. You know, he shot me. He shot me, caught me shooting craps in the lobby with Cotton Pippin and her, what was it? Nubs clicking. Do you remember Nubs clicking? We're shooting dice in the lobby, and Stengel comes in with Leishman, and all of a sudden the guy taps me on the shoulder, and he says, Mr. Bellboy, and he says, that man wants to see you up in the stairs. You know, I got my sergeant uniform on. My uniform was still in from the service. I go over there, and Stengel says, hey, soldier. He says, I want to tell you one thing, boy. He says, I don't want to go for anybody shooting crap in my lobby of my hotel. Put them damn dice in your pocket and never see them again. Whoa, Jesus. About 4 days later, I was gone. Bremerton won me, Sam was the manager, and I came up, and there it was. I became his coach, his trainer. I did everything. I ran his pictures, and I started to get the feel of what it was all about. Win 16. Then 1947, went back, had Al Ronnie, and made him my catcher. He was my private catcher. I made that guy catcher. He caught me 15 games. We won. And 7 shutouts, and he never caught a game in his life before. That's a true story, right?
Right.
All right. So, that career of mine, because I was just a little bit screwball, which I am still, lucky to be alive at 80. But I've always been able to know that I've been very, very lucky human being. From nothing to be allowed to do something that I wanted to do for all my lifetime. This last year was my 60th straight year in uniform. I was the oldest guy still tying shoelaces. But I hit 80, and I said to Jorgensen, I said, we're back in Johnson City, and I've been working out on guys. We're going to Bisfield and we're going to Hudson Valley and coming back riding the bus. And my God, I'm standing there looking at these guys, and I know none of them are going to get out of A-ball. The whole pitching staff, nobody can pop your lip for Christ. I said, what the hell, I might as well forget it, Lord, go back and enjoy life, like a little golf. So I told him, I said, if you can find some young guy that you want to take my spot, I said, you won't hurt my feelings. So then that's when they called me down to Scottsdale, gave me the big watch, and I'm retired. But I want to tell you something. I still live in Yakima. I've got so many memories of all of you guys here inside of me that it just makes me feel so tremendous and happy to be here with you guys. Johnny Pintar there. And good Arteza and all them guys. And I just want to say, I hope I'm living long enough to come back here next year. And I want to thank my son for coming, my other son for coming, and that beautiful gal over there is my little companion now, Helen. Stand up there and say hello to everybody. She's a damn good school teacher. There you are. Thank you. He wants to tell me that story. Which was it about?
Tell it.
Oh my God. Well, anyway, little boxing Dennis, the little Dago, he's umpiring. We had cockeyed Molitor pitching. He's got one eye going this way and one eye going that way. He's the only guy, he'd take a side from the catcher guy on first base. He wouldn't even have to come from a stretch. This eye saw the guy at first and he saw the sign of the catcher. It's the funniest thing you ever saw in your life. But anyway, Dennis just spits a couple of pitches. Molitor comes in and he starts walking, and all of a sudden Dennis just says, you're gone out of there, brother. Now Molitor, he takes off, goes in the shower. In the old days in Tacoma, their clubhouse, the visitors was here, the home was here, right in the middle was a petition. That's where the umpire's room was. It was down the right field line. So we're all there taking a shower after the game. Molitor was in first, and he was in his shorts. And he starts popping off at Dennis Itch across the petition. And they got to arguing, so all of a sudden Dennis Itch says, I ain't gonna say what he said, but he says, get outside, brother. And all of a sudden, here Molitor went outside, and here's Dennis Itch. Now I want to tell you something. The fans were going out of the ballpark. And all of a sudden, they saw that fight start, and they made a big, like watching a circus or something. Here comes Ray Jacobs out, big first baseman manager. We're going to try to break him up. He throws everybody out. He says, let him go. Let him go, boy. And I want to tell you that Dennis Itch, he's like Sugar Ray Robinson, bounce around, pop, pop. And he does, pop, pop. Molitor's getting hit here and here. He's great. Pretty soon we broke it up. Now, the next day, here's his story. Walter Abel was the president of the league. All of a sudden, Jacobs gets a telegram. You are suspended for the rest of the year and fined $150. Molitor, you are suspended for the rest of the year and you're fined $150. Now, they're both gone, and they made me the manager. Can you believe that? I started managing when somebody got fired. Well, anyway, it started me on a career, and I've been in it ever since, and I'm very happy, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
I'd like to now introduce a bat boy with the Tacoma Tigers in 1939, Gene Kelly.
Thank you. Well, the best thing about being a bat boy and clubhouse boy was going on road trips. You think that wasn't something? These ball players would make Bob Hope look silly as clowns. Thank you very much.
I'd like to now introduce a pitcher. Who now lives in Davenport, Washington, played for Spokane, WIL, also played with the Rainiers. I'd like to introduce Pete Jonas.
There's hope for us, Mike.
Well, to my knowledge, I was the shortest pitcher in professional baseball. And I can still hear the opposing players when I march out to the mound to start a ball game. This isn't bad. They'd yell, "Hey, short and spotty, oh, but nobody." With the ladies and youngsters here, I won't tell you what my reply was. I'll only say that I always did my darndest to strike out that first guy, and sometimes I got the job done. I just want to say, this is the second time that I've come to one of these meetings. Many years ago, I came to a meeting, and I think it was held in Maple Valley. And I had a very good time. For one reason or another, I never came again. I got an invitation every year, but for something came up and I didn't come. And I hadn't intended to come this year, until Dave called me on the telephone and said, "Did you get an invitation?" I said, "Yes, I did, but I didn't think I could make it, so I deep sixed it." He said, "You've got to come." He said, "I've just been reading the names of fellows who are going to be here." And he said, "I'm sure you know many of them." I thank God that he called me, because this has been one of the most enjoyable days that I've spent. I can't tell you when. To see guys like Cy and Clint Cameron and all the rest of you that I've said hello to and visited with. I truly appreciate being here, and I truly appreciate the work that these fellows have done to put this on. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to introduce one of the hard-working members of our Oldtimers committee. I played for Bremerton from 49 and 50, also for Spokane in the WIL, Vern Cahoot.
I think probably, oh my goodness, do I smile? I can't. I got a bad arm. I think my fondest memory of the WI League is that I contributed so significantly to the success of so many of you sitting in the room today. Because every time I came to town and took the mound, everybody raised their batting average at least 10 points. So have a good time. Thank you very much.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention another ball player who was planning on attending. He had an operation for a hiatal hernia, and that's Bob Doretto, who lives over in Wenatchee. I had high hopes of trying to, 4 of the 5 gentlemen in that Capellanos quintet are still living, and we've not been able to find Bob Wellman, and George and Kay are here, and I had really high hopes of getting them to perform again, but a duet, I'm just not sure any of us could handle. You know, maybe a trio possibly, but Bob was unable to attend. This next individual played for Bellingham in 37 and 38, Salem in 40 and 41, had an outstanding career in the WIL and long history in sports. I'd like to introduce Al Leitner, came up from Salem for today. Al?
Sports.
he hadn't changed a bit. I've known him for so many years. I was probably one of the more famous players in the Western International League. All you pitchers, you all grinning, still laughing. I'm coming to bat. Yep. But I was noted for 4 things in the league. I set a league record for strikeouts, 145, when I wasn't a pitcher. I still hold the record. I was a bus driver for Bellingham. From Bellingham to Spokane, 9 hours flat. Nobody ever beat that. Our manager was Ken Penner, and I guess he had it about right. He made the lineups and he announced them before the game every day, every night. Leitner, you lead off, we'll spot him 1 out. And on the walls of all the clubhouses around the league, there was an all ugly team. I was on every one of them, captain of both. Other than that, I'm just real happy to be here and see a lot of you guys. Green law, shame on you. Used to get me up and looking at it. But it's been a pleasure coming from Salem with Bill Beard over here, and I hope we will be able to come back in next year. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to introduce Bob Mcguire, who played for Victoria, among other teams in the WIL. Bob?
You know, I played with the Vancouver, Victoria, Yakima, and the Tri-Cities, and also coached and got interfering with my baseball. But I'm happy to be here because I used to have to eat in Hub Hills Restaurant. Yeah.
This next gentleman had an outstanding career in Wenatchee and Salem. Also had a long career with the Sacramento Solons, and he came up from Sacramento this morning. Richie Myers. Come on up, Richie. I warned you that you were going to have to tell at least one story.
Thank you all. It's a surprise. Mark called down Sacramento in the Valley, got Clint Cameron. He got a few more, and I ended up as one of them. I only played in the WI for 2 seasons, 49 and 51. And I got to talk about the 49 season. We had a club that's on the wall over there that I think the team averaged 323. I was the worst hitter in the league. I only hit 302. And they all hit over the average over 20 home runs. I only hit 19. But anyway, it was a wonderful experience at WI. Came back up to 51. I enjoyed it. I saw all these friends around here today, and it's really heartwarming. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
This next player played in Tacoma in 1948 and in several years for the Vancouver Capellanos. Tossed a no-hitter one of those seasons. His glove is over there hanging on the wall. The Vancouver Capellanos jersey is one that he wore. And I'd like to bring up George Nicholas. One thing about George, you never have to ask more than once about a story. George lives down in Cathedral City now, just right outside of Palm Springs, and wasn't sure he was going to be able to come up. He just had cataract surgery, but things are going well.
Thank you very much. Thanks. My honor. Thank you. I want to thank you for this honor. I appreciate it. However, I'm going to relinquish my time to my worthwhile and erstwhile competitor, the loquacious Ito Benny. Thank you very much.
This gentleman played for Victoria and Yakima, and the WIL, lives up in the Monroe area north of Seattle. Warren Noyes.
Well, this is a surprise because
I didn't mount much in the WI League, that's for sure. I spent most of 50 and some of 51. Al running, he was my catcher whenever I got in there, which wasn't very often. And John Marshall, who I hear has passed away, was one of the players. Kay Charlton was on the team. Oh, I don't think he remembers me. Well, anyway, it's been a nice time being here today. I had a swell meal. I've been telling Mr. Price, is he gone? You want to hear a lot of stories about Hayden Walker. I played for Boise, Idaho, and probably some of you know about him. He was a character that, well, he was even better than John Marshall, who was a character. I got to tell you a story about John, then I'll get out of here. We had a family night one night in Victoria, and I'm sure you fellows remember the merchants donated a bunch of stuff, and then if you got the lucky ticket, you went down the field and picked up your prize. Well, one of the prizes happened to be a toilet and a toilet seat and I guess a sink, I forgot. And so they had John Marshall down there handing them out. Well, he was a big clown. Takes the toilet seat, puts it up here, and says, "I'm the king of the WI." Thank you.
Is Harry Nygaard here?
Yes.
Wonderful. Harry Nygaard pitched for Tacoma in 1947. Harry, come on up.
Let's hear it. All right, Harry.
Harry also played briefly with Vancouver.
Well, if I knew I was going to be up here, I probably wouldn't have showed up. Like I said, I went through high school playing football, basketball, and baseball. That was my education, and turned down college scholarship because I wanted to play pro ball. I hurt my arm, but I had 4 years and had a lot of fun. But I learned one thing through sports, and I got it for everything for sports that I've done in my life. When I got out, an old Lincoln ex-ball player, quite an athlete, talked me into going selling vacuum cleaners door to door. And that was 45 years ago. And that's what I've done for 45 years. And the reason I did so well is all sports. Man, did I hate to lose. And the company that I was with, they would put up these big contests, cars, and trips all over the world. And I didn't like it. The sports carried me right on through. I wanted to be a winner. I didn't win them all, but I won 30-some national contests. Financially, I came out better than beyond my fondest dreams. And I give it all to sports.
This next gentleman played for the Tacoma Tigers in 39 and 40 and 46. He played for the Seattle Indians in 37. You can see his glove and cleats, and I always love looking at those sliding pads from 1938 when he was with the Vancouver Maple Leafs. Let's bring up Marion Oppelt.
Would it be fun if you were here?
The story I would tell would be pretty short. It would have to do with my first acquaintance with Howie G. When I first started coaching down at Clover Park High School, Howie G was in kindergarten.
Well, this next individual played for Wenatchee in 1938. Also had a nice career with Sacramento and the PCL. John Pintar.
I have all these celebrities in front of me here. I don't want to be up here too long. I only have one thing to say there. And following Hub Kittle's aliquot that he says here, And the only thing I can say that I was a lot younger or older than Hub Kiddo when we played baseball. He was 80 and I'm 84, so that's the only benefit that I got better than he had. Thank you very much.
This next individual played for Tacoma in 38, in WIL, and in Yakima in 49 and 51. As you can see in the program under the player profiles, a very extensive career. I'd like to bring up Larry Powell. Larry and his wife Janet drove up from Nanuba, California.
1949, I was with Visalia in the Cal State League. I went to the ballpark one morning at spring training and got my release, and I knew right where I wanted to go. Before the day was over, I had sent wires to 5 different clubs in the WI League, and I got one tumble, and that was from Yakima, and that was one of the places that I really favored going. And I went to Yakima, had a good year, and Yakima won the pennant. And I love this country up here, and I love the fishing, I love the people, and it's a wonderful place to be. I got one story to tell. The Wenatchee Visitors Clubhouse was totally inadequate. It was bad. So we walked into the clubhouse. Leroy Patton was one of our ball players. Leroy looked around, sized up the clubhouse, and he made what I thought was a classic statement. He says, "Gotta be glad when spring training is over and we get back to Boston." Thanks, folks.
Larry was gracious enough when we had our first reunion in '89 to come up here for that, and obviously Tacoma has a fond spot in his heart because he's returned once again. So we wanted to present Larry and his wife with this book on Tacoma. This next individual played for Tacoma in 1942, Pat Rooney. Where's Pat?
I haven't really got much to say. Graduated from Lincoln High School in 1941, and the war was coming on, and they couldn't find any ball players, so Tacoma needed ball players, and I think they drew my name out of a hat. What they say about ball players is really true, all this stuff you're hearing, because what an experience it was to play with guys like Maury Abbott, Charlie Shands, Chet Johnson, and Bill Holmes all on one team. The guys that played against you knew what kind of guys they were. They were really characters. And Bob Stagg's going to be up here pretty soon. He was another one. Thank you.
This gentleman's name has already been related in several stories. It was a catcher, played for Victoria among others, Al Ronning. Al came up spur of the moment from Sunnyvale, California. Thanks for coming out.
Hey, I don't know, I'm still working. I'm still scouting for the Scouting Bureau in California. I've been with them 23 years, and I think this is my last year. After my first 3 years of playing pro ball, I came home and I lived with my mother, and she says to me, "Albert, why don't you get an honest job?" This is my 50th year in baseball. Anyway, I was his personal catcher, Hub Kittle, okay? Now, the umpires used to say, "For Christ's sakes, Al, tell him not to load him up some of the spit's hitting me in the eye." And then he said, "No, he's doing it again. Don't tell him. When he needed a strikeout, here's the rubber, right? Rubber's here. He's pitching it here. You get that strikeout. Tell him to get back onto the rubber." And that's the umpires used to do that all the time. Now, John Marshall's name was brought up here. Now, he was a hard-throwing guy. I caught him for 3 or 4 years, and what a character. And most of you guys know him. And he could throw hard, but he was goofy. Oh, he was terrible, him. But Alan Strange had quite a way with him. When we go to Vancouver, British Columbia, he'd always call like a Joe Brown and put it in the paper that John Marshall was going to pitch, okay? And they packed the place. There were people all around the place like that. And John had a big red handkerchief in his pocket. When he'd come out of that bullpen to go out onto the mound, he'd take that thing out and he'd go like that with it. Oh my, and the people went crazy. Alan Strange says, now the first pitch you throw out of the ballpark. First pitch, he throws it out of the ballpark, the people are going crazy, crazy. Anyway, that's a few of the stories, but anyway, Brown up there, he hit a way of not counting all of the fans that come into the Vancouver Capital Stadium. Alan Strange put Hub Kittle out there with the counter one night. He shortchanged the Bremerton Blue Jackets 1,000 people. And Hub had the counter and he's clicking all these things. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be here, see all these young people. Thank you and God bless.
One of our earlier inductees into the Wisconsin Hall of Fame, I'd like to bring this next gentleman played for Salem and Tacoma and the Tri-Cities in the WIL. I'd like to bring up Al Spader. Al came up from California for the function.
For those of you that are left, it's really a pleasure to be here. And I'd like to say again, I think it's a terrific job that Mark and all the guys that worked together to bring all of us here. I know I had a terrific Dave there. I got a call from Dave that generated my action to come here. And it's really been rewarding. I mean, tremendously rewarding. I started in the hotel meeting Larry Powell and talking with him and Hub Kittle. And pardon me, I didn't talk with Hub Kittle. I listened to Hub Kittle. It was a great league, and George Nicholas and trainer Reggie there, the trainer for Vancouver. And I've been waiting for 2 days for my buddy, my roommate there, Clint Cameron, to show up there. And he came in today, and I was looking for Bill Beard and Al Leitner, and they showed up today. And it was a league that some people call a friendly league. Well, it was friendly. We were friendly after the ball game. We weren't too friendly during the ball game, and that's the way it should be. I had a pretty good incident regarding that. I had played ball at the University of Southern California for 4 years, and it was interrupted by the war also. I was in Europe and Japan, and came back in '46, started playing ball. And I was with the Salem Senators and went into Victoria one year, and I guess it was 1948. And a fellow by the name of Jack Palmer, who was a very good ball player, he was also a Yankee farm hand at the time, called me and invited me to his place where he was staying to have dinner with him and his wife before the ball game. And during that ball game, we started the game at Victoria there, and Jack Wilson was our pitcher. Not our pitcher, he was our manager, and he happened to be pitching that night. Those of you who don't remember Jack Wilson, he was quite a pitcher for the Boston Red Sox when Ted Williams was playing. And some of us call him Black Jack Wilson, and he was out of this area. And Palmer gets up the bat in the third inning, and Jack Wilson hit Palmer in the back. Palmer, I'm the second baseman now, whether you know it or not. I was a second baseman, and Jack was on first base, and he yells over to him, and he says, "You told him to throw at me." And he made a few other words at the time that I don't want to say right now. But he said, "You told him to throw at me, and I'm going to get you when I come down there." And our shortstop was Joe Gedges, a fellow that played around here for a long time. Also played with Hub and Bremerton and so on. And Joe said to me, "Al," he said, "What did he say? What did he say?" And I said, "You heard what he said, and he means what he says." I said, "So if you got a ground ball, make sure you don't fumble it. I want to make sure I get across this bag, make the double play, and get out of his way, because I know this guy. He's a tough little monkey." Anyway, the ball's hit to Joe Gedges. The ball's hit to his right. He goes over to make the double play and fumbles it. Just enough time to keep me there long enough for Palmer to get down there and really knock me on my family, which he did. And really hurt, so we came up fighting. Here we're fighting right at second base. The umpire is John Nesbitt, and not saying a word. He's an ex-fighter himself, from what I just understood later. But he's not saying a word, but Palmer's wife is up in the stands with all the other wives. She's like, I can't understand it. These guys just had dinner at my house, you know, and there it is, fighting with my husband. But it's a good example of what it was. In fact, I just saw Jack Palmer last couple months ago in Palm Desert. And we kicked that one around a little bit. And that's another great memory of lots of memories that were in that league. And lots of great guys.
I'd like to now introduce Bob Stagg. Bob played for Tacoma in 1942 and had an outstanding career with the Seattle Rainiers. Bob?
I knew both of those people who clapped. Thank you. And I classify them as friends, in spite of everything. I've been listening to the remarks that have been made and trying to, I shouldn't say outdo, but to stay within the realm of being truthful. I won't try to outdo them. But this sort of reminds me of a little story I heard, and I hope some of you know who Samuel Clemens was. Mark Twain. Real simple. Well, you know, Mark Twain was very acute with the English language, which I am not, as you can readily see. And he could tell stories, come to the point, and explain himself very well. Well, this one day he went to a meeting this afternoon, and it was one speech after the other. And throughout these speeches, Mark didn't have anything to say, or Sam didn't, which was not his custom. So when it was finally all over and they closed the thing down, one of his friends come up to him and he said, Sam, he says, why didn't you have anything to say today? Oh, he says, this whole meeting reminded me of a couple that I've known for 20 years. Well, so what's so strange about that? Oh, he says, well, he hasn't spoken to her in the last 18. Well, so what? Well, rather, why didn't he speak to her? Well, he said he didn't want to interrupt her. Thank you very much.
This next gentleman was the first player signed to a contract to play for the Tacoma Tigers in 1937. Had a wonderful PCL career. I'd like to bring up Slammin' Sam Harvey Story.
Well, I don't know about that first Tacoma player I ever signed, because I came up to Tacoma from Portland Beavers. They sent 5 of us up there with the idea to buy one of us back. Well, they were saving the option money on me, and I don't know, $100 a month or something like that. And I was the only one that stayed, and I really had a terrific year up there. Best year anybody could possibly wish for. At 347, 202 hits, and 133 games, something like that. 18 home runs, and drove in 102 runs, I think, something like that. And I'll always be indebted to Tacoma for that start. And I should have been in the big leagues, but I broke my leg at the wrong time and kind of eliminated that. But I was very happy with my career. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
now like to introduce Lynn Tran. Lynn played for Vancouver and the Tri-Cities in the WIL, also briefly with the Seattle Rainiers. Lynn?
I'll just go over the advantages and disadvantages of being at the end of the program. The disadvantage is trying to find something to say after all these eloquent ball players are up there telling their stories. One of the advantages is I could talk ahead of Ito, who was at the end of the alphabet. He's working in the seat to get up here and say something. I would like to say that we really appreciate what Dave and Mark have done in getting us all together. It's so nice to see faces we haven't seen for so many years. In fact, I saw one face that I started my career at the University of Washington back in 1943, Warren Noyes. Really a surprise. I do want to mention one thing, that most people don't recognize the fact that back in the late 40s or the mid 40s and the early 50s, the Western National League had a schedule close to 160 ball games. And that is something to think about, because the travel in those days was all Greyhound bus, sometimes charter buses. And the travel, you put it all together, had to be a tremendous amount of miles. In some cases, we were traveling from Vancouver via Wenatchee, clear to Edmonton, Alberta, and traveling clear back to Edmonton, Alberta to start a ball game the next evening in Salem, Oregon. And that was rough. Going down the Yakima Canyon in those days when the Super Highway wasn't in over there at 60 and 70 miles an hour at 2 o'clock in the morning, and running into a herd of wild horses coming off 4-7 hills. You appreciate what we went through. I do have one little story to tell about my experience in Tacoma. My brother Ray was at Tacoma at the time in 48, and I was in Vancouver. And we just finished a doubleheader. Ray was living in the Olympic Hotel. And the Greyhound was downstairs waiting for me, and we were getting ready to leave to go to Spokane. And this was the 4th of July. And I had a couple of firecrackers in my pocket. We were up on the first floor, or the second floor. And there was a little old fellow coming home from work with his lunch bucket, walking down the street. And I got there, and I dropped the firecracker all the way behind him, and the lunch bucket went up in the air, and the poor guy just scared the living daylights out of him. There was a policeman across the street, and he says, "I see you, you stay right there." So he can run across the street, and I said, "My God, Ray, I gotta get going. We gotta go hide or do something. Come on." So we went down to the ladies' shower, put the rest of the firecrackers under the mat, closed the door, and listened to the people coming down the hallway. And the hotel manager was trying to explain to this cop that Ray's room that we were in at the time, but we were in the shower room now, was that, well, those people just came from back east, and they got in here real early this morning. We don't want to bother them. So, at any rate, the guys were still in the bus waiting for me, and needless to say, we were about 3 hours late before I finally got on the bus, and we got going where we were going. Thank you very much.
Brother Ray, why don't you come on up? Ray Tran. Ray played for Tacoma in 48, also played for Vancouver and Tri-Cities.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here tonight. You folks have really put on a beautiful show for us. And playing in the Western International and the Coast League was a really great pleasure for me. The only thing I feel now is the big leagues right now and the other leagues, I wonder if they had the fun that we had when we were playing. I think they play more for money now than they do for the fun. Thanks for inviting me.
Next individual I'd like to introduce is Ito Vanny, who needs no introduction. So Ito, come on up. And I was specifically told to ask that you do an impression of Leo Lassen while you're at it, please.
Well, this is the first certificate I've ever received. Anyway, I want to thank the committee here for doing such a wonderful job and bringing us old-timers back together again here. It's something that you pick up the papers every day and you see some of the old boys disappearing. They're going upstairs and some of them downstairs, but we're going to all meet together someday. But getting back to Hub Kittle, I remember one time we were playing in Yakima and he loaded them up, Al Ronnie's his catcher. So finally I got so damn disgusted, I went and got a bucket and a paintbrush. I said, why don't you just do a good job so we know what's coming? But these guys have told practically all the stories that I can tell you. But I got to tell you a story about poor Dewey Soriano now with Alzheimer's. He's in the rest home in Seattle. He was pitching for San Francisco. He was sold to the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was pitching for San Francisco. So they wanted to get a big drawing crowd here in Seattle. So they billed him for a Saturday night crowd. And by golly, the ballpark was just jammed. I'll never forget this. The first batter up was JoJo White, and he had a single in the center field. I was the second batter up. I nubbed one down the third baseline for a base hit, 2 pitches, 2 hits, 2 men on base. George Archie comes up, he walks. And the fourth guy up was Bill Lawrence. And the next pitch, he went back over the left field fence, and it was a home run. And as we're going around the bases, O'Doul come running out of the dugout from San Francisco, and he come up to Bruce Orgodowski, the catcher. He says, they tell me that Dewey had terrific stuff down in the bullpen. He was knocking the catcher's glove right off his hand. And he says, Bruce, does he have anything? And Orgodowski says, how the hell do I know, Frank? I haven't caught one yet. And I see my dear friend Al Leitner here from Salem. I agreed with Al Leitner one time. He was a sports editor at the paper down. I would do anything for baseball in Salem to get the crowd stirred up. So he gave everybody at the ballpark that night that came a red hanky. So naturally the ceremony, the ballpark was jammed. And so I was all prepared. I said I'd do anything to help baseball in Salem, but just to agitate the fans. What the hell? If you don't have anybody in the stands, you haven't got a payroll. So the umpires come up to home plate, and they brought me up to home plate, and they blindfolded me. And they bring this beautiful girl out. Oh, I tell you, she must have been sexy. Let me have your hand. They took my hand, and I ran down, I got right down there, and I patted it. I said, boy, this is going to be fun. And he says, are you ready? Took the blindfold out, and there was a bear. And the trainer says, now go to the left, because if you go to the left, that bear will cuff you, and you're going to go down. So I went to the right, and he hit me, and I'll swear to God that that bear was eating garlic bread, because he was all on top of me. But take away anything from baseball, you have a great bunch of full-time baseball players here that have been surrounded here in the area for many, many years. And you know, you come back with these modern-day ball players, baseball has not changed since the game was invented. The only thing that's changed, they have the designated hitter, the guys are wearing pajamas up at the plate, then they go up the bat and they got gloves on, and then they go to get the first base, they take the damn gloves off, and they put another pair of gloves to help you run. Now you tell me where that's going to help you, and help stimulate the crowds here in Seattle. If we hit a loud foul ball back there in the old days, like George Nicholas back there, he used to knock me right on my butt at least 4 times a game, and I used to enjoy it. I felt I was important, because if I could get on base, I could have one way of beating the guy. But that's the way they played the game. The Western International, the competition was there, it was great, and the fans were stimulated because you had ball players that played the game from their heart. Believe me. And this is what baseball has to get back to. Something like they had in the old days back there when you had to travel all night by bus and get up and face some guy like Bob Costello in Spokane that had glasses that thick and You'd wonder if he could find home plate. He threw at me 3 times, and I finally hauled my hanky out and I waved it. I said, here I am, there's home plate. Now, you people remember Joe Rossi. He played here in Tacoma. He was a catcher. So they came to Spokane, and Joe used to josh with me all the time, and Minisich was the umpire. And Joe would always try to get me in confrontation to distract me from the next pitch. So I called time. I said, Joe, I said, you know something? You're never going to be president of the United States. He was gullible as hell. He says, why? I said, because they can't get your nose on a nickel. His nose used to stick out of the mass that far. And in that same game we played, I got on base, I stole second, and I stole third. So the next time up, Rossi says, oh, you're trying to show me up, huh? So I got on base again, and I stole second, but this time Joe threw the ball to third base. Brillhart came out of the dugout. He said, what the hell are you doing, Joe? Making a joke out of this game? No, he said, I was just heading him off. But we had a lot of fun in those days. I remember down in Eugene, Oregon, down there, we had John Marshall on our ball club. He was a character like Al Rodman. I tell you, you don't know what the hell the guy was going to do from one inning to the other. And Joe Rossi was our catcher. We got him over to Spokane finally. And Joe Rossi was catching. And Joe, you know, these fans down there in Eugene, they'd just get on Joe something mercifully. You big nose, you ought to get more hits. You swung that nose of yours in that bat. You know, stuff like that would irritate poor old Joe. Finally got thrown out of the ball game. This one guy up right by the dugout was getting on Joe. Joe lit up a cigarette and stuck it in his pocket. All of us guys were peeping out of the dugout to see, watch this guy. And all at once, this guy's on fire. But, you know, you have fun in the game, and if it wasn't fun, they made fun. Like Hillis Lane, who I played with in Seattle, he was managing Lewiston. So the dugouts in Lewiston down there, the climate down there gets to be about 120, and there was no place to go to the bathroom, so you urinated in the dugout. And you know, when you get urinating in the dugout where the heat is, that smell isn't too good. So he had a ground rule. He says you had to stay in the dugout. So when they came to Wenatchee, I had some characters like John Marshall. So those guys went up in the hill, and they captured about 3 rattlesnakes, put them in a sack, and they got loose boards in the dugout, so they threw the rattlesnakes down in the dugout. So I had a rule that you had to stay in the dugout, and I did that to Lane. And they had a little colored boy by the name of Jacobs. I can't think of his first name. He got down and he rattled those boards, and I think that kid is still running. But I want to thank the people here again for being so nice to us old-time ball players. Oh yeah, there's one more story I got to tell you about John Dennis. John just passed away here about a week ago, and I went up to see him at the hospital. And I go up there maybe twice a week to see him. He stuck his hand out and he says, Dago, I just want to go to sleep. So I go up there and John would reminisce these stories. He passed on, so. Here's a story. I put 4 years, I played with the Raiders. We won the championship in 39, 40, and 41. Then I had to go into the service, the best years of my life. But I'm here, I'm alive. Like Hub Kittle says, when you come back, you count your blessings. The poor guys that couldn't come back, they'll never had a chance. So John Denisich, I come back out of the service. It was on a Saturday night. We're playing in Seattle, and the ballpark is pretty well jammed up. But then, during the 4 years I was gone, you got a new breed of fans, younger fans, and you know how they are. And I come up to hit, and all I know, I screwed up in the outfield for some darn thing or other. And one guy, another young guy, right by the bats there, yelled up at me. He says, Dago, you couldn't hit with your nose, you know. And I told Ramadi, the catcher, I says, they're talking about you. You're Dago, not me. So on the next pitch, John Middlesex called a lousy strike, and that goes for you too, you Pollock. So I called time, and John says, where are you going? I says, I think my handle of the bat is cracked. So I went over by the bat rack, which was about 30 feet away from home plate, and here's this young kid there. He was all pepped up, you know. I says, you know, that's not the same girl you were with last night at the ball game. That took care of that. But you know, you can go on and on and on forever telling stories about the characters that were in the game. I had, Jojo White was our manager, and he was from the South, and he didn't have too big of a vocabulary, so I was up hitting this one day, and this umpire called me out on the pitch that bounced up the home plate. He come running out of the dugout. He says, "You're incompetent." And I called Jojo aside. I said, "You know what that means?" He says, "No, I don't, but it sure sounds good." But you know, you could go on and talk about your ball players today, your modern ball players. If it wasn't for these ball players here today that surrounding here in this room that kept the game alive in the Western International League, riding those buses, and like myself, riding those buses all night, the baseball today wouldn't be here today. Now, if they get a hangnail, they go on the disabled list for 30 days. In those days, if we had a hangnail, we didn't go to a doctor because there's 2 other guys wanting your job. That's the difference in your players today. Now, if you had a loud foul ball, they'd call you in the office and they'd give you a raise of $100,000. I mean, it's stuff like that that irritates you. And these ball players, if they would just communicate in the surrounding towns that they play in, come out and give autographs to the young kids and say, look, try to help the game itself and get it back to where it used to be. That's the main thing in baseball today that it needs, a loving care. Well, I appreciate being here, and thank you, and God bless you all. Well, I got a sore throat. Like Leo Lassen said, if you've ever been hit with a foul ball, you don't know what you're missing. I was talking to Ray Ortega down in the dugout before the ball game. He says, you know, Leo, whenever I go after a pop fly, I never take my mask off.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Dick Waivel. Dick came up from the Portland area, played for Salem. Dick?
Now, this is the first slip I have that hasn't been pink. But nevertheless, I enjoyed being here. If it hadn't been for Harvey's story, I wouldn't have come, but he needed a ride. So anyway, thank you very, very much.
Now I'd like to introduce the longtime trainer in the WIL with Vancouver, Reg Wallace. Reg? Reg has got a lot of stories. He visited last night. He's not going to tell them all. He sat back in the clubhouse all those years, very silent.
I know one thing you're going to be glad of. I think according to the alphabet, I'm about the last guy to come up here. So, my good friend Pete Jonas, I rehearsed the speech he gave for 2 weeks, so he took it away from me. So I don't have to tell you how happy I am to be here. And another thing before I close, any of you old goats that had to come up here and walk all the way back, I brought my liniment bottle with me. If you need a run
I'd now like to introduce Lee Winter. Lee came up from Sacramento along with Richie Myers and Clint Cameron, who came up from Visalia. Lee played for Wenatchee and in the WIL for a couple of seasons and also for Sacramento in the PCL.
Is that the last one? Yes, it is.
I knew I'd be the last one. Thank you very much. I want to thank you guys. I'm glad to be here. And Richie Myers here, he's one of my good old buddies. We play a lot of golf. He beats me all the time. But I was a pilot in the United States Air Force in 1946 and had some scouts follow me, and they thought I'd be in the big leagues in a couple of years. So I got out of the Air Force and signed with Sacramento in 1947. They fired me to Wenatchee in the WI League and had a pretty good year. Went to the Central League in 48. Did pretty good until I ripped my ankle, so back to Wenatchee in 49. And I didn't do so good, so they sold me to the Pioneer League, and I had 3 pretty good years up there. Got married in 50, and that was good. And so Sacramento brought me back again in 1953. Well, I was there for a couple of months and they were gonna sell me again, so I said goodbye to baseball and I went into the sheriff's office in Sacramento and I retired as a sergeant, put 21 years in, and I'm happy to be here.
Nice catch. Now, have we omitted anybody? I think we pretty well covered. Forget anybody else? Just a couple of real brief, very brief comments. There were a couple advertisements in here for a couple of the books that we raffled off, and there were also some flyers over there. If you've not had a chance, if you have a love for the PCL, take a look at these flyers, and if you do happen to end up purchasing one of these books, write a little note to either of the individuals, Dick Dobbins or John Spalding, and put a bug in there to consider taking up a history of the WIL. A reminder, please, again, to WIL players, please sign the guest book back there. And before we dismiss you, right after we dismiss you, we'd like all of the WIL players to come up here for one big group photo. Our banquets normally end at 6 o'clock. We greatly appreciate your indulgence, but we felt that it was well worth the time. A lot of people again have come up from California and Oregon, and thank you all for sharing your thoughts. Again, congratulations to all the inductees, and hopefully we'll see everybody next year. Thanks a lot for coming.